welcome back to my blind playthrough story analysis of Clair Obscur. Instead of a pithy intro, I'm going to start with clear spoiler boundaries. This video is about Act 2 of Expedition 33, so if you haven't finished Act 1, you are in for major spoilers. However, if you haven't reached the very end of Act 2 yet, that's alright, because I'm not going to talk about the Act 2 finale. Instead, I want to talk about Act 2 itself, and the storytelling and themes that are revealed in fragments throughout its explorable space. This video is effectively a snapshot of my thoughts before approaching the monolith. I realized this is an odd way to do story analysis, pausing partway through and presenting ideas before I've finished the game. Except that Expedition 33 has stories within its story. There is a linear plot to progress, of course, but the beating heart of the game is found everywhere else. And it can be surprisingly easy to lose sight of that unraveling story once you've reached the end. Or so I suspect. For me, it's really valuable to capture my own evolving understanding of this game, and I appreciate those of you who are interested in following along. If you're worried that I won't have anything interesting to say because I haven't finished the game yet, then hi! I'm Silent Ellipsis, and welcome to my channel. Rest assured that there is plenty of content in Act 2 for us to analyze, and I will come back and discuss the game as a whole later. So again, if you're in the middle of Act 2, I recommend you at least finish Old Lumiere before watching the rest of this. And if you want to reach the same point in the game I'm at, then finish exploring Act 2 just before approaching the monolith, then come back. So, without further ado, let's discuss Act 2. We begin with the very end of Act 1, with one of the facts that I avoided in my last video, that we lose our protagonist, Gustav, only to have his role immediately supplanted by a new character we had only heard obliquely referenced, Verso. Major character death is famously difficult to handle, but Expedition 33 honors Gustav properly. The weight of his passing sticks with the characters, and it's difficult for Maël in particular to find the motivation to continue. Gustav's death is not merely drama, however. This event ties into the evolving themes of the game in several important ways. For one, we see that the story of Expedition 33 is tripling down on its theme of legacy. Gustav frequently wondered what he would leave behind for those who come after, and now we get to confront that question directly. Now that Gustav is gone, we have the temptation to define his story. Is he the man who sacrificed himself to protect Maël? Was he her brother, her father, or both? And perhaps the strangest question of all, if he is no longer the protagonist, then who is? The character who takes on Gustav's role in combat, and takes on the immediate role as our POV character in camp, is Verso. And yet, this is the character we know the least about. It's hard to feel that Verso represents ourself when he is a mystery to us, which is exacerbated by the dialogues with Monoko and Esquier that make it clear that he is intentionally hiding something from the rest of the party and from us as players. Through this strange choice, the story draws our attention to the importance of perspective. There is not a single story unfolding before us, but several. The idea of Gustav or Verso as the protagonist of this story was illusory from the start, because this is a story where competing perspectives vie for control of the narrative itself, as we'll see more later. The second major theme that Gustav's death sets up for us is grief, and specifically how grief changes our perception of the world and the story. While there are still some noteworthy moments of comic relief in Act 2, including one of the best delivered jokes in the entire game,
I will never join you again.
There will be a lot of fighting, though.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's true.
There will be a lot of fighting.
Exactly.
Count me in then.
the story overall shifts and becomes much less whimsical than Act 1. And as we progress through Act 2, both of these themes converge, for in bits and fragments, we gradually come to understand that the story of this world isn't abstract or grand, but deeply personal. For, from the perspective of an individual, losing one person and losing the world may be indistinguishable fates. If we think back to the whimsical aspects of Act 1, we can recall something specific about them. The first thing Gustav says upon encountering Gestrels, just before the ultimate Sakapatat fight, is, "They sound like kids." Indeed, the childishness of Gestrels is one of their main selling points. But this is also true of Eskie, a being that has immense strength, and yet derives his strength from neat rocks and the power of friendship. Eskie follows the kind of logic we see in the classic Calvin and Hobbes comics, where a boy projects onto his stuffed animal every positive trait he can imagine. And as we venture into Act 2, we repeatedly encounter the ever-fading form of a young boy, who speaks to us in fragments about the world around us. We also encounter the Grandis, yet one more kind of creature that the expeditioners believed to be fairy tales. Indeed, they look like they could fit right in among the creatures of Where the Wild Things Are. Their name is pronounced Grandis in English, but is spelled like the French grandi, a form of the verb meaning grow, which can be used specifically to mean grow up. The Grandis explicitly say that they once played with young children before the fracture, and while they may have just as many fantastical qualities as the Gestrels, they represent a total inversion of values. Where the Gestrels are obsessed with fighting, the Grandis are more concerned with the art of conversation and poetry. They seem like a more mature fairy tale, but in turn, they are still a caricature of actual maturity. So in truth, the Grandis are best understood as a representation of maturity, a representation from a childlike perspective. And with this in mind, the world of Expedition 33 that slowly comes into focus is a world of conflict, not just between Nevrons and expeditioners, but a conflict of representations, a conflict of worldviews. We get more and more hints that the world before the fracture had the quality of a child's fairy tale, and this fairy tale world has had a head-on collision with something brutal, something dark, something grieving. The further we get into Act 2, the more clear it becomes that the surreal imagery around us is as much representation as reality, and this fact takes center stage once we encounter our first Axon. The game encourages you to first visit Visage, and as the name implies, it's an island made entirely of faces. This is the land of he who guards truth with lies, for access to truth is mediated through the surface, through the visage represented to the world. The party notes the double meaning of this title, as one who protects truth or one who controls truth. I can't help wondering if this double meaning would be better captured in English with the word keep, the one who keeps truth. And the boss at the end of this section is indeed called the Mask Keeper. Either way, this Axon puts an end to any doubt about the role of symbolism in Expedition 33's storytelling. What we are battling throughout this game are representations, and that on some level we are engaged in a battle of ideas. Mask Keeper, in his dialogue, brings our attention to the meaning of verso I alluded to at the end of Act 1, as the reverse side of a piece of art. In the context of a mask, the meaning is even more in your face. That is, literally, it refers to your own face, the inside of the mask, as opposed to the outer appearance of the mask, the recto side, which is the lie you show to the world. In this context, Verso's name highlights how much he lies and hides from us, but also highlights the ongoing relationship between the internal and external. Verso is, in a sense, trapped inside of himself, trying to guard truth instead of confronting it. And indeed, overcoming this particular axon relies on Ciel, the person who is most willing to accept the role of the mask in mediating truth. This section of the game is dripping with symbolism, and I could make a whole separate video about the axons, but for now, the key point I want to focus on is representation, and how the axons in particular demonstrate that the world we are exploring in Expedition 33 is made up of conflicting perspectives. In fact, this connects to the terminology of axons and nevrons. When axons were first mentioned by the game, it solidified a suspicion that had been building in my own head, that nevron was intended to evoke the word neuron, because axons are also part of nerve cells. Specifically, axons are long extensions of the main body of a cell that connects neurons together. So, if nevrons are individual ideas, then axons are the threads that link ideas together into greater wholes. And this is exactly the kind of imagery we see in each axon region. This terminology also makes it clear that we are dealing with a world of the mind, that we are encountering memories and impressions of a particular person, or rather competing memories and impressions of people who disagree. As Act 2 continues, the identities of these memory keepers gradually becomes clearer as we slowly learn the names of the members of a family whose trauma has shaped the entire world. In the mid-19th century, French painting had developed a sophisticated but rigid set of artistic standards maintained by the Académie des Beaux-Arts, or Academy of Fine Arts, which prized detail, well-contoured composition in studios, and historical and mythological neoclassical subject matter. However, in the midst of the Industrial Revolution and dramatic social change, there was a growing movement to confront the modern realities of a changing world, both in art and in the written word. In the world of painting, this led a group of rebellious painters to defy convention and depict modern scenes, painted outside in natural lighting, using techniques that attempted to capture the actual experience of seeing the world, rather than an idealized notion of vision. This style was derided by critics as overly impressionistic, and that name stuck. Today, the Impressionists, particularly Monet, Manet, Degas, and Renoir, are among the most famous and revered painters in history, but in their time, they were highly controversial for their attempts to make art that was, in a sense, more honest and more visceral than what the institutions around them insisted upon them making. It's easy to imagine that this story resonates with the creators of Expedition 33, many of whom left work at larger, more established studios to make a game that defies convention. And it's not a coincidence that the story of Expedition 33 is built around the dynamics of a family headed by a man named Renoir. We also find numerous references to a woman named Aline, which was the name of Renoir's wife in the real world. By the time we reach the end of Old Lumiere, the connections of this family to our own party of expeditioners become clear, as Verso is revealed to be Renoir's son, and the masked woman to be his sister. At a critical moment, when Verso rushes to protect Maëlle, we also hear him call her by his sister's name, Alicia. Somehow, the grief of this family is being played out within this world in the form of the fracture, and different aspects of the same person appear to confront each other. Now, why this family is so important, and what they are grieving, isn't explicitly revealed during Act 2, but the linear plot revelations are not where the story is actually being told. Rather, this is a story that is hidden in plain sight. What stands out most about Expedition 33 is the ambiance of this world. The visual and musical style pervades every inch of the game, and as inundated by the developer's craft as we are primed to accept the raw emotion of the game first, and only slowly start to see the symbols, images, and words that have been repeated since the game began. Consider the music specifically. There are some tracks in English or French, but much of the soundtrack includes a significant amount of gibberish, non-semantic vocalizations with occasionally recognizable phrases strewn in. But as we listen to the same tracks again and again, we can start to make out names, and maybe even short phrases. Listen to this bit from the Act 2 overworld music. And then skip a bit. I'm not going to try and translate or interpret all of the semi-French, pseudo-Latin phrases right now, as much as I'm tempted, because the overall point is that you're not intended as a player to be able to make sense of these lyrics the first time you hear them. Rather, this is music that you engage with first in terms of raw emotion, and then over time, you slowly start to recognize names and themes. And if you speak a little French, whole phrases that relate directly to the gradually unraveling story of this world. This is what I'm tempted to call Impressionist storytelling. It conveys first the raw emotions that you're meant to engage with, but over time, we gain the ability to slowly zoom out, and the individual brushstrokes converge into a larger picture that was there from the very beginning. You realize that you've been hearing these names throughout the entire game, that they are almost etched into the emotional core of the world itself. We get similar revelations about this world from our frequent trips to the manor, a house that almost seems to exist outside of normal space, which we access through scattered doorways. Through one door, we find a child's room, filled with trains, with small figurines of gestrels, and upon the bed, a plush creature we can recognize as Esquier. The Calvin and Hobbes comparison I made earlier is all but confirmed by this small piece of environmental storytelling. This fantastical world was built from the imagination of a young boy. In it, his favorite plush, the thing that makes him feel safe at night, is the most powerful being in the world, and the paintbrushes he is learning to craft with become living creatures he can play with. Consider that gestrels can be reborn upon making quote-unquote chroma offerings to the sacred river. That certainly sounds like the kind of story a child would tell himself while twirling his paintbrush in water, cleansing it so that it's ready to receive a new color. Now think about Monoko, a new companion introduced in Act 2. He has the love of battle that is common of gestrels, but he's uncommonly furry and uncommonly loyal. He's obsessed with feet, and his theme music, well, just listen to it for a minute. He's saying, bow wow wow. I think Monoko is inspired by the young boy's dog, envisaged as a heroic gestrel in this fantasy world. And we do know this young boy's name, because among all the toys in his room, we find a record labeled Verso. It's no wonder that Verso is Esquier's best friend, and that he calls Monoko mon vieux, his oldest friend. Or that both Monoko and Esquier would agree to keep Verso's secrets for him. So a boy's dog and plushie manifest as guardians to lead young Verso on adventures through this land, until some kind of catastrophe befell, and we are still picking up the pieces of that tragedy. The point is that all of the details of this world are present from the very beginning, and it is the context that shifts. Our own perspective changes, and whether we see the world as frightening or fantastical is a question of how we relate to it, as, among other things, we level up and early threats become trivial. It's tempting to keep going, but I, for whatever reason, am committed to this act-by-act structure, and I still need to play Act 3 before I'm ready to actually go wild on the interpretation of this game. I hope you're all enjoying it as much as I am, and we can all return again after one more act. I intend to make a video discussing just Act 3 once I've finished it, before zooming back out and discussing the game as a whole. Maybe this format is more effort than it's worth, but I suspect I will look back and be glad that I was able to capture my own thoughts while partway through a story that I will continue thinking about long after the credits roll. In the meantime, be sure to let the algorithm know that this is some engaging content, and let us hope that the remainder of the game doesn't break my heart too badly. Until next time.
Parfait.